this is Scott Nachitello with the Your OKC Property Manager podcast. This is actually our first podcast. I'd like to introduce to you here Siva Nachitello.
Hi.
Siva put together a lot of the equipment and everything behind this podcast. So thank you very much, Siva, for putting all that together. It was a lot of work. I thought for our first podcast here, we would just go over some questions that we commonly get asked all the time by people who are, maybe they're moving away from Oklahoma City and they're deciding not to sell their property. They want to consider getting that property managed. Maybe it's a situation with someone who's been managing the properties by themselves, and now they're realizing all the hassles involved in managing a property by themselves, and so they're at least exploring the possibility of having a property management company like ours help them with that. We have a whole list of questions here, and Siva's going to kind of guide us through those questions. So let's just, Siva, if you can take it from the top.
Yeah, so my first question would be, what is a property manager actually responsible for?
So we've, as a company, we've been managing other properties for people for about the last 12 or 13 years or so, and almost from the very beginning, most of our customers have been out of state, and so we've really had to be the boots on the ground for our customers and handle pretty much anything that involves going out to the property. So there's a whole list of things that are involved because some of our customers, quite frankly, they've never even seen their properties. They might live in California and purchased a rental property. They have no intention of ever coming to Oklahoma City, and so they need a company like ours to step in and provide that assistance. So one of the first things is getting a property ready to rent. And so sometimes we have to go in, get cost estimates to have work done, maybe replacing carpet, taking care of some painting, those types of things. Another thing is taking care of the advertising for that. And so we have a proven system for advertising on multiple websites, and I'll get a little bit more into that here in a minute. For showing the properties, we do in-person showings so that we have showing agents that meet prospective tenants out at the properties, and they meet them there to show them, and that we feel like that's the best way to provide a quality tenant. Another thing is screening the applications. We have a leasing coordinator here who takes care of that, and I do a final review on all those applications before we seek to approve anybody. Just putting the leases together. We work off of 12-month leases. And so that's also included in this process, something that the property manager takes care of. Collecting security deposits and rents. That's all the way to if the tenant stops paying the rent or something like that in the evictions. That's an unfortunate thing that sometimes just happens. And I mean, it doesn't just happen, but it does come up from time to time. It's something that the property management company, they need to be well prepared for when that happens. Another thing is the accounting. Providing accurate accounting to our owners so they know exactly what the rents and incomes for their properties have been. Setting up service calls to the property. So anytime there's maintenance needed, that's something that the property management company steps in and makes a judgment call on, who's the best. Is it one of our in-house technicians that should go and handle the service call, or is this better handled by a contractor, by getting one of our our approved vendors out to take care of the issue, all the while taking care to make sure that it's something that's going to be affordable. So we don't want to pay top dollar every time something breaks. Another thing is setting up inspections for the property. And I'll be getting into that in a little more detail, but going out and checking things out, checking the maintenance, seeing how the tenant is taking care of the property, or if the tenant's not taking care of the property. Providing an estimate of costs for any service items that are needed. Paying vendors, obviously those vendors, once they do the work, then they need to get paid. And then handling requests from tenants and owners. Sometimes there could be insurance-related items, other special requests that the tenants take care of, and because we're never going to tell the tenant to just call the owner and take care of that. Most of our owners, they don't want to have that like, it's not a good idea for the tenant to have the owner's telephone number, because then the tenant's going to be, every time there's something wrong, or they're going to be pesting the owner about that, and that's not the owner's job. That's our job to take care of those types of things. So that's really that's a long list, but that's what I have on my list for that.
Okay, yeah, so that leads me to my next question, which would be, well, why not just manage your own property by yourself?
Well, so that anyone can actually do that. I mean, yes, when I first started owning rental properties, which is how I got started in this business back in the 1990s here in Oklahoma City, buying rental properties, I managed all my properties myself. I self-managed. I learned how to do property management the hard way, and certainly you can do the same thing. A lot of people realize all the hassles that are involved, everything that you have to know in order to do things legally and properly. There's a lot to know, just in terms of the laws and the more practical things too, like screening a tenant, and just like kind of reading between the lines to make sure that you're making a good decision on approving or denying an application, and not making sure that you're following the fair housing laws when you're anyway. So there's a lot to track and take care of. So yes, you can do it by yourself and you can save some money, but is it really worth the risk just to save that little bit of money of making a mistake, and then not having access to like our list of vendors, like whenever a problem comes up, and then just having the hassle of the phone ringing, and then not quite knowing who to call to get a problem taken care of.
Okay, how can you know how much your property will rent for?
Well, this is maybe one of the first things that someone who's moving away needs to find out. They need, they have a mortgage payment that costs X amount per month, and they need to have a realistic expectation for what the property can lease for. And so we're always happy to provide a rental estimate. You just need to contact us, provide those free of charge. You can also look that information up yourself. I mean, what do other properties in the neighborhood lease for? There might be one that you know of right across the street that's almost the same as your house. If you know what that property leases for, there's a good chance that yours will lease for about the same. But again, you can contact us, and we're happy to provide a rental estimate on your behalf.
So if you are, moving away and you're thinking about getting into property management and renting out your house, how can you know that your house will even be profitable?
A real important thing to keep in mind, because you have all sorts of different types of costs to take into consideration. You've got property taxes, insurance, you've got maintenance costs, the cost of having the property sit vacant. So it's a good idea. It's a really good idea to put those figures into some kind of formula, and you can do that on paper. We also have a free tool on our website that you can download, a cash flow calculator, and I believe that's in the resources section of our website. So you can go there, kind of punch the numbers in, and see just kind of see what kind of cash flow you'd be looking at based on real numbers.
So you mentioned the cost of vacancy. So how long does it take to find a tenant, and how do you find a good tenant?
Screening for a tenant is super important in terms of making sure that you're set up properly, because if you put the wrong tenant, the wrong person into a property, it could be nothing but trouble. And so it's very important to do a careful job screening. To get applications to screen, you have to do enough advertising to get people interested. So the number one source of leads for us is the postings that we do on 2 different websites like Trulia, Zillow, apartments.com, websites like this, that when someone is looking for a place to rent, they go to these websites because they know that that's where those things are advertised. So we have 13 different websites that we do those postings on, and we have a scheduling software that kind of works in the background to automatically schedule tenants for particular times when they want to see the properties, and which matches up with the schedule of our showing agents, and it also, that software also creates a waiting list. So if a property is not quite available for rent, it sends out notifications to those people as soon as we open it up for showings. Very important.
Okay, well, how can you be sure that you get a tenant that won't tear up the property?
Well, Cindy, you can never be 100% sure that's going to happen. Most of the time, there's some amount of damage to the property. Even if it's just the carpet needs to be cleaned and they left a little bit of trash in the property. So there's usually a little bit. It's unusual to have like tons of damage, although it can happen. It goes back to doing a good job when you're screening tenants. There's certain things that to look for. There's all kinds of things to checking with their prior landlord to see how they took care of properties that they lived in before, because I think it just makes sense that the way people's habits in the past are probably going to be the same as what they are right now, and so it's important to check into those things, and also, once the tenants have moved into the property, it's important to do inspections periodically, just to keep an eye on the property and see what kind of what's happening in that property. Just make sure that the tenants are doing what they're supposed to do.
So when that stuff does come up, how is maintenance handled?
We have in-house maintenance here. That just means that those technicians are our employees. The advantage of having in-house maintenance is that it allows us to get out to take care of problems quickly. And what we want to do is maintain a good, healthy relationship with that tenant by giving them good service. And if we're making that tenant wait days and days to get an item fixed, that just aggravates people, and so we want to get someone out to the property quickly to take care of problems. The other thing is that we've got we've got people, we've got insurance on takes care of things like workers' comp, and in case they get injured or something like that. Now, our in-house maintenance can take care of a lot of things, but they can't take care of everything. So that's why we have a good list of vendors. So if there might be a plumber, electrician, a roofer, professionals that really know how to do the job, and they've proven themselves to us, time after time. A lot of them for just years and years. We're not going to send a vendor out to a property if we think they're going to be shady, or they're going to, because that's the last thing we need to deal with is as having to deal with the problem of a vendor that doesn't know what they're doing, or they're shady in some way. That's part of our job is to know who we're sending out. Part of our job is also to follow up and make sure that this work gets done properly, and we always stand behind our work. So if we send out someone, they screw up, we're to send them back out there to fix the job. And it's just not right to charge the owner.
So do you all send an itemized statement?
Yes, we every month we send an itemized statement to the owner. I quite often hear from prospective owners who have service with other property management companies, just telling me that, oh, I haven't received an itemized statement in months. That's just a huge red flag, and it's totally unacceptable. Part of our job is to provide those itemized monthly statements so that when we send the direct deposit to the owner's bank account, they understand exactly where that rent deposit to their bank account came from. Like, what exactly were the expenses, and what was the rent that was collected during that period of time. Let me add to that, we also send at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, I should say, a summary of the last 12 months of finances. So that's something they can just go ahead and turn over to their person who does their taxes.
So is there a contract involved with your property management?
Yes, we do enter into a property management agreement with the owners that we're representing. We have to enter into that contract before we can do anything on their behalf. Before we can start advertising, showing the property. Before we can do any of that, we have to enter into a property management agreement. And one concern that owners have is, well, gee, it's kind of like your cell phone. How long am I going to be locked into this contract? So by law, by Oklahoma real estate law, there does have to be a term for the contract. We set our contracts up for 12 months. However, we also put in this contract a clause which allows the owner to cancel with 30 days notice, because sometimes may not even be unhappy with the service we're providing, but they just decide to do something else with their property. Sometimes owners decide that they want to sell their property, that it's time to do that, and so we feel like it's not right to put roadblocks in front of owners just to try to keep them longer as customers.
Do you collect a security deposit?
Well, yes. Usually the security deposit is equivalent to 1 month of rent. Sometimes we change that a little bit. Sometimes if a property we're just not getting a property to lease, we might drop that security deposit amount with the owner's permission. Usually equivalent to 1 month of rent. And we keep those funds in our security deposit account. Those proceeds are distributed once the tenant moves out, and at that point we can send the tenant the funds that are the tenants, and the owner the tenant the funds which are the owners, and that's based on the condition of the property. That's about how much damage the tenant did when they were in the property and didn't take care of before they moved out.
So do you ever do an inspection to the property?
We do inspections, which are part of the service we provide, is to do before they move into the property, a thorough walk through the property and get photos. And also once they've moved out, we do a walk through and we have to determine how much damage, if any, was caused by the tenant and deduct that from their security deposit. But we also, as kind of our default and our lowest level of inspection would be to do, we call it an interior survey, 2 months roughly before the lease renewal. And the reason to do this is we want to find out exactly what is the condition of the property, for one thing. And for another thing, we want to find out if there are any maintenance items that need to be taken care of. Because sometimes these things get unreported. And for instance, if you have a leak going on underneath a sink or something into a cabinet, it may cause so much damage that the cabinet eventually needs to be replaced. We don't want to let it get to that point. So we send out a technician. We schedule them to do a maintenance survey of the property. They go in, they get a lot of photos. They do this on an app, so they've got kind of a checklist for things to check and make sure are good. So I mean, one real important thing is, are they tearing up the property? Kind of what's going on in that regard. We share with the owner this report, and it's got like tons of photos in it, and so it really, I get a lot of good response from owners when they see these reports, because it gives them a peace of mind that that the tenant's taking care of the property and the place isn't just falling down. So that goes, I think, a long way sometimes in reassuring people that things are all good.
So what happens if someone decides to move out or the property does become vacant? What's the first steps to finding a new tenant?
So we've come up with a process for this after, kind of working through the same thing over and over and again, and kind of coming up with what we think is the best system for getting a new for anytime we have a turnover or change in tenant. So the first thing we do once we get that notice from the tenant, that 30-day notice that they're going to move, is we send a notification to the owner and let them know what's going on. And usually that notice says something to the effect that, hey, we got notice from such and such resident that they're planning on moving at such and such date, and that we're going to post the property for rent. And at that time, we also we look at the rental statistics for that neighborhood, for that house, and we see, well, what should the rent be? Because we want to make sure that we're not just posting the rent the same as what the tenant was paying, but is that rent that we're advertising the property for in line with what's going on in the neighborhood? We don't want to leave money on the table. We don't want to market too low, but at the same time, we also don't want to put it too high and not get in a situation where people aren't interested in looking at the property because they think it's overpriced. And people know, they know if the property's overpriced. So we'll send that notification to the owner. And then since we already have the photographs in our system, we already have the information in this software that we use, we can go ahead and repost that for rent, update the listing, make sure that we have the correct rent amount and security deposit that we're looking for, get that all updated, and then the software that I mentioned that we have for scheduling showings, that will automatically build a list for us, a waiting list of people to want to. So as soon as this property becomes open for showings, we can get them over there and they can see the property. You also have some people that just they realize that there's a little bit of a competition involved in securing the property that they're most interested in, and so they'll put in a rental application, and so we may be able to get them approved and have them move in just very shortly after the tenant is there, moves out. So that's the first step. Since we know when that notice was put in, we know when to expect the keys. So we're paying attention to the timing on that, and making sure that if the keys haven't come in by the date that they're supposed to come in, we're contacting the resident. Even before that, at least several weeks before the scheduled move out date, we're also sending a move out checklist to that tenant, and that contains a list of things that we are expecting them to do in terms of cleanup and that sort of thing, in order for them to get the most that they can get back from their security deposit. And that, I mean, we love it when we can give back the entire security deposit, because that just means that the tenant's done an excellent job cleaning up the property, and it'll probably be ready to rent as soon as we get the keys back. That's the ideal, right? That's the ideal. That's what we want. So once we get those keys back, then within 24 business hours, we've got someone out there doing the walkthrough, and getting this walkthrough done, which I had already described, so I'm not going to go through it again. So just to decide what the tenant should and should not be charged for once they've done. And what we're also doing when we're doing that walkthrough is we're coming up with any kind of punch list of work that needs to be completed on our end in order to get that place ready to rent, because we want that thing to be turned around and re-rented as quickly as possible, because not only when that property is vacant, not only does the owner not make rent, they're actually coming out of pocket, because they're having to pay things like their mortgage, taxes, insurance. There's all kinds of things that they're having to pay for. So that's why vacancy is so expensive, and so that's it. And you know, as soon as we're like getting these punch lists together, we put work orders together to get them done. We get the owner's approval to have that work done. We get it scheduled and completed as soon as possible, and then open up the property to showings, and so that hopefully we can get that property leased out just as soon as possible.
Okay. So what happens if your tenant did stop paying rent? Do you all take care of the eviction?
Yes, that does happen from time to time. You know, the first thing that happens is that we notice that the rent hasn't paid, that the rent is late. Okay, well, so we reach out and try to find out from the resident what's going on, why wasn't the rent paid. And a lot of times, like most of the time, we can get something worked out. Probably just they'll end up owing a late fee, but the rent does get paid, and so we don't actually have to evict them from the property. But sometimes this doesn't always it's not always the case. If they haven't paid after they're ignoring us or what have you, the first thing is to give them a 5-day notice. That's the first legal step in doing an eviction is serving them with that 5-day notice. If they haven't paid the rent within that 5 days, then we are we're sending the file off to our eviction attorney. We have an eviction attorney handle these things from us just because we don't want to screw up, and it's easy to screw up on an eviction. Since you have legal aid down at the courthouse helping to find problems in eviction filings, they're down there every day of eviction court. And so we want to have the top-notch professional taking care of the eviction so that things don't get thrown out of court and we have to start all over again. So we send that to the attorney's office. The attorney's office does the filing, and it usually takes about a week for them to get a court date. We have one of our professionals from our office at the hearing when they're having eviction court, just in case any testimony is required. And we actually don't charge any fees to the owner if we've placed the tenant from our office for the eviction. It's kind of our way of acknowledging that, well, you know, we played a part in putting the tenant in here that we're having to evict. Now, you still have to pay the attorney's fees and the filing fees and that sort of thing. If we get judgment from them in court, we'll either be able to take possession of the property right away, or meet the sheriff out to lock them out if they're refusing to leave the property, which does occasionally happen. But yes, we can assist with an eviction, and those are the steps involved. It doesn't take it doesn't take 6 months to do an eviction. In Oklahoma, you can really, most of the time you can have an eviction taken care of in less than 30 days, but those are the steps involved.
So if I wanted to not have pets at my property, could I do no pets?
Yes, you can do no pets, but I'll always suggest that you don't want to do that, and the reason is that about half of families or people have some kind of pet, and so you're a lot of times eliminating some of your best applicants just because they can't have their little tiny chihuahua move into the house. Yes, pets can do damage to properties. That's absolutely the case. We do offer a $1,000 pet, kind of a pet guarantee when we're with our contract. So that that usually is enough to just show the owner that this is going to make sense for us to allow pets in the property. I mean, we screen the pets, and
can you explain a little bit about your pet screening process and that $1,000 guarantee?
Sure, yeah. So we're finding out what kind of damage or what kind of risk that pet poses, and we may deny the pet. It may be something like a pit bull puppy. It just doesn't. We're just not going to approve for that. We're not going to approve for 6 dogs. That's too many in a house. And our pet policy, we're guaranteeing up to $1,000 in damage, in pet damage, and that's in addition to the security deposit. And in order for us to do this, we charge the tenant a monthly administrative fee for this, but the owner has that as a backup. But I also might mention that fair housing laws, which we have to follow fair housing laws. Every owner does, and those fair housing laws have rules about emotional support animals, and so with an emotional support animal, you know, you can't charge fees to the tenant for that, and if they provide the proper documentation, then we have it. So a lot of times, you know, you can advertise a property as no pets, but still they're going to be able to take in their dog or their cat or whatever. If that dog or cat is considered to be an emotional support animal based on the documentation that they've gotten from their physician. So we have to follow the law in that regard.
Well, Scott, I don't have any more burning questions on my end, but if someone did have a question for you that we didn't talk about today, how could they reach you and how could they get a hold of you?
If you've gotten this far into the recording, thanks for hanging in there. If you do have any other questions and you'd like to kind of have my take on that or my team's take on that, please reach out. You can always go on the website and request or book a time on my calendar, and I'll call you, and we'll do a call.
And what's your website?
The website is OKC PropertyManager.com, and or call. You can also call, but the best way to reach out really is to either book something on our calendar or fill in one of the forms at the bottom of the website to request a call back. Okay. Well, thank you, Siva. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all.